I don't love you anymore. I need someone better. And you? You only clean houses. You're a failure, and you always will be." Those devastating words crashed into Grace Mendoza like a knife to the chest. The exact second Daniel Vega stepped down from the graduation stage, diploma still warm in his hand, and she rushed forward with open arms, her heart overflowing with pride, ready to hug the man she had sacrificed everything for, only for him to shove her away hard, right there in front of the entire crowded auditorium of the Instituto Comunitario de San Diego, while their little son, Tommy, stood clutching her hand and smiling innocently, because his mother had promised him they were there to celebrate Daddy becoming something important. The applause that had filled the hall only moments earlier seemed to freeze and die as hundreds of eyes turned toward them. Grace stood frozen, with her arms still half raised in the air that had been meant for love, now filled only with public humiliation and unbearable shame, while Tommy looked up at his father with wide, confused eyes, not understanding why Daddy had just pushed Mommy away like she was nothing more than dirt on his shoe. That single, brutal moment of rejection on the most important day of Daniel's life became the painful turning point that shattered Grace's entire world, yet quietly planted the seed for her extraordinary rise from the ashes of betrayal. San Diego was a quiet, peaceful town in the center of California, where families had put down roots for generations among endless orange groves and dusty summer streets, where everyone knew everyone and news traveled fast like wildfire through dry grass. Grace Mendoza and Daniel Vega had met when they were young and had fallen in love slowly, without drama, in the way people from small towns do, sharing quiet evenings on front porches with music drifting from open windows and the sweet scent of orange blossoms in the air. She was 20, with an easy, warm laugh and a quiet inner strength that always knew what she wanted from life. He was 23, hardworking, steady, and reliable. The kind of man who kept every promise even if he spoke few words. 2 years later, they moved into a small rented room in the barrio, and soon Tommy arrived on a bright Sunday in March, a beautiful boy with big, curious eyes and a contagious laugh, who instantly became the center of their small but happy universe. Neither had studied beyond high school. Daniel worked long, exhausting days, loading heavy boxes 8 hours straight at a distribution warehouse, while Grace cleaned houses 3 days a week and took care of their son the rest of the time, cooking, cleaning, washing, and making sure Tommy never lacked love or attention. Money was always tight, but their love felt strong enough to carry them through until one ordinary afternoon, Grace spotted a faded poster on a lamppost announcing open enrollment for an accounting program at the community college, night classes, affordable tuition, and scholarships available for low-income families. That same night, over a simple dinner, she looked at Daniel with genuine excitement sparkling in her tired eyes and said, "You should study first. When you finish and land a good job, you can pay for my studies later. We will rise together, hand in hand." Daniel hesitated, feeling the heavy weight of rent, bills, and a young child pressing down on him. But Grace insisted with a calm, quiet determination that had always defined her, because resolving problems and carrying the family forward was what she did best without complaint. For the next 3 long years, Grace organized her entire existence around Daniel's dream. She woke long before dawn, prepared Tommy for daycare, cleaned other people's homes until her back ached and her hands were raw, took extra weekend jobs at a clothing store, cooked dinner, washed clothes, and waited up late into the night for Daniel when he returned exhausted from his night classes. She made him fresh coffee, reviewed difficult textbooks with him when he struggled, encouraged him through every moment of doubt, and whispered softly, "It is almost over," even as her own body screamed with fatigue and her own dreams were quietly set aside so his could shine. Tommy grew up in those years, watching his mother work without ever complaining, his small hands sometimes helping her fold laundry or set the table while she waited anxiously for the sound of his father's key turning in the door. In the 3rd year, Daniel began coming home later and later, claiming he had group study sessions that ran long, and Grace trusted him completely, because she had bet her entire future and every ounce of her strength on that trust, refusing to let even the smallest seed of doubt take root in her heart. What she did not know was that those late nights always included the same classmate, Madison, a confident girl who had already completed 2 years of accounting and who seemed to understand Daniel in ways Grace never could. The graduation day finally arrived on a bright, warm Saturday in June. Grace dressed carefully in her best green dress, the only nice one she owned, brushed Tommy's hair until it shone, and arrived early at the auditorium so they could sit close to the stage, where she held her son's hand tightly, her heart beating with pride and nervous joy. She scanned the crowd until she saw Daniel enter, not alone, but arm in arm with Madison. Laughing at something, he whispered close to her ear, his gaze fixed on the young woman with an intensity and tenderness that Grace once believed had been reserved only for her. Tommy tugged excitedly at her hand and said, "Mama, that's Daddy." "Yes, my son," Grace replied, her voice steady, even though something deep inside her chest had already begun to crack and bleed. Daniel spotted them for one brief, painful second. Their eyes met across the crowd. Then he quickly looked away and continued walking with Madison toward another section of the auditorium, as if they did not exist. Grace stayed seated through the entire ceremony, clapping politely when Daniel crossed the stage and received his diploma, because Tommy was clapping with pure innocent joy. And a mother does not teach her child to hate, even when her own heart is breaking into pieces. Afterward, in the crowded, noisy hallway, Daniel caught up to her, his face set in cold determination, and that was when he delivered the final crushing blow, pushing her away roughly in front of everyone and speaking those devastating words out loud for the whole world to hear. Grace felt a cold, heavy weight sink deep into her chest. 3 years, she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. Only 3 years of my life. I gave everything I had so you could stand here today holding that diploma, and this is how you thank me. Daniel offered no real apology, just a cold shrug, and Grace turned away, taking Tommy's small trembling hand and walking out into the warm San Diego evening, the weight of betrayal heavier and more painful than any bag of cleaning supplies she had ever carried in her life. They walked slowly for 20 long minutes, the boy unusually silent beside her, until he finally looked up and asked in a small voice, "Mama, does Daddy not live with us anymore?" "No, my son," Grace answered, kneeling down to cup his precious face gently in her hands. "But we do. We always will." It was then, in the middle of her deepest, darkest despair, while her heart still ached from the public humiliation, that Grace noticed an elderly woman struggling at the seat corner with 2 heavy market bags that looked far too much for her frail arms. Despite the pain tearing through her own soul, Grace stopped and offered to help the elderly woman. Mrs. Evelyn looked at her with kind, clear eyes, full of quiet wisdom, and they walked together half a block to a small, modest house with a simple garden in front. Mrs. Evelyn invited them inside, brewed a warm pot of tea, and listened patiently as Grace poured out her entire painful story. The 3 exhausting years of sacrifice, the graduation, the public rejection, and the crushing words that had reduced her entire contribution to nothing more than cleaning houses. When Grace finally finished, her voice breaking with emotion, Mrs. Evelyn spoke gently and without hesitation. "I have an extra room. My daughter used to live there. It has been empty for years. You do not have to pay rent. Just help with the market sometimes and keep me company. I live alone. This house is too big and too quiet for one person." Grace hesitated, feeling unworthy, but Tommy looked at Mrs. Evelyn with innocent seriousness and asked, "Do you have cookies every day?" The old woman laughed warmly. "Every single day, my child," and in that tender moment, Grace accepted the unexpected lifeline that would quietly begin to heal her broken life. That night, in the quiet spare room, Grace lay awake, staring at the unfamiliar ceiling, wondering how her world had collapsed so completely in a single afternoon, yet feeling for the first time in many hours that someone truly saw her, not as a failure or a cleaning lady, but as a worthy human being, deserving of shelter, kindness, and a second chance. The first few days in Mrs. Evelyn's home felt strange and awkward. Grace moved carefully, trying not to take up any space, rising early to wash every dish and make herself as useful and invisible as possible. But Mrs. Evelyn stopped her firmly on the third day and said, "Stop walking on tiptoes in my house. While you are here, this is your home too." The money that once went to rent now went towards something new and hopeful. Grace enrolled in the same community college where Daniel had studied, this time for a business administration program, attending night classes 3 evenings a week. The first week nearly broke her spirit. She returned home at 10 o'clock, completely exhausted, dropped her heavy backpack on the floor, and sat staring blankly at the kitchen table, admitting to Mrs. Evelyn with tears in her eyes that she understood almost nothing. Everyone else seemed to know all the terms, while she felt completely lost, and perhaps Daniel had been right. Perhaps she really was not meant for this kind of life. Mrs. Evelyn sat across from her with 2 steaming cups of hot tea and asked, "How old are you, my daughter?" 26, Grace answered. "I learned to drive at 43, Mrs. Evelyn said. "What you are doing is much harder, so you cannot quit after just one difficult week." Grace drank the tea, opened her notes with trembling hands, and studied until 1 in the morning the exact pattern that would define the next 4 long, demanding years. 4 years of working full days, studying exhausting nights, raising Tommy alone while Mrs. Evelyn cared for him during classes, teaching the growing boy how to play dominoes and sharing beautiful stories from her own childhood in Jalisco. Tommy began calling her abuela. Naturally, one ordinary day, and Mrs. Evelyn hugged him tightly, her eyes misty with emotion, though she laughed and claimed it was only the onions she had been chopping in the kitchen. Daniel called 3 Sundays in a row to speak briefly with Tommy, then stopped completely, disappearing from their lives as easily and coldly as he had pushed Grace away at the graduation. Grace pushed through every difficult exam at the kitchen table long after Mrs. Evelyn had gone to bed, fighting constant exhaustion, crushing doubt, and the painful memory of Daniel's cruel public words every single night without fail. On the evening before her final exams, Mrs. Evelyn sat beside her with 2 cups of tea and asked softly, "When do you graduate, my daughter?" "Next semester," Grace answered without looking up from her notes. "Good," said the old woman. "I already bought my best purple dress. You were not going to leave me at home, were you?" Grace laughed through sudden tears, not from sadness, but from the deep, overwhelming gratitude of having found a true, loving mother figure when she needed one most. Graduation day finally arrived in May, in the very same auditorium where she had once been so publicly humiliated. Mrs. Evelyn wore her finest purple dress. Tommy, now 8 years old, sat proudly in a crisp button-up shirt she had ironed that morning. And when Grace's name was called and she walked across the stage, diploma in hand, Tommy jumped to his feet, shouting at the top of his lungs with pure joy, "That is my mom!" The entire crowd smiled warmly, some clapped loudly, and Grace looked toward the seats where her real family waited, her eyes shining with a quiet, deep triumph that needed no revenge or harsh words. She started working as an assistant accountant in a respected financial services firm in Fresno, learning every system and process with quiet determination, climbing steadily through consistent hard work alone. In 3 years, she was promoted to area coordinator, and in 5 years, she became operations manager. One ordinary Monday in October, while carefully reviewing resumes for an open position, Grace opened the 3rd file and saw the name Daniel Vega, accountant, 4 years of experience. She read it twice, then placed it calmly in the interview pile. The next day, Daniel walked into the conference room wearing his best suit and froze completely when he saw Grace seated professionally across the table. She greeted him with calm, professional politeness. "Good morning. Please sit down." The interview lasted a full 40 minutes, filled with technical questions and straightforward answers, And at the very end, when Grace gathered her papers, Daniel could no longer hold back. "Grace, I know I have no right to ask anything, but I need to know. How did you get here?" She met his eyes directly and answered with quiet strength. "At night, after working all day, while raising Tommy completely alone. The same path you took, except I had no one to make coffee for me when I came home exhausted." Daniel looked down at the table. "I made a very big mistake." "Yes," Grace said simply, without anger, without drama, and without raising her voice. Just the calm, certain dignity of a woman who had already healed and moved forward. Before he left the room, she asked one final gentle question. "And Madison?" She left after 2 years when she found someone with a better position. Grace nodded without any further comment and showed him politely to the door. That same evening, back at the house, Grace sat peacefully in the garden with Mrs. Evelyn and Tommy, sipping warm tea, watching the beautiful sunset, thinking about the old poster on the lamppost, the green dress she had never worn again, and the painful words that had once cut so deeply. Yet here she stood, not broken, not bitter, but whole and strong. She felt no sense of triumph and no lingering bitterness, only a profound, peaceful completeness. Because the woman, once publicly called a failure for cleaning houses, had quietly cleaned her own difficult path with her own 2 hands, and now walked it with quiet dignity and grace. If this story touched your heart, it is because something in it felt deeply familiar. Give it a like and share it with someone who needs to remember today that no one can ever define your true worth by the work you do right now. Your dignity is built moment by moment when you choose to rise, no matter how many times life tries to knock you down. And if you're not yet subscribed to our channel, do it now and turn on the bell notification so you never miss the next story. We will see each other very soon.